Welcome to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today, we have a special treat for you. I am on location in San Francisco with a panel of expert attorneys who are sharing their thoughts on building the 21st century lawyer. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. Today, your Law School Toolbox host is Lee Burgess. That's me, but I typically co-host the podcast with Allison Monahan. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. Allison and I are the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the Catapult Conference. Allison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review and rating on iTunes. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started. We would like to thank Thomson Reuters for sponsoring this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast. You likely interact with their products every day using Westlaw, Twen, and Practical Law. Thomson Reuters brings you tools and insights to help you be your best now and when you go pro as a practicing attorney. You can visit them at lawschool.westlaw.com. So welcome back. Today I attended a very interesting panel discussion in San Francisco on building the 21st century lawyer, and I'm lucky enough to have many of the panelists join me here on the podcast to share some of their insights on the future of the legal profession. The panel was part of the West Coast Law Firm Leadership Forum, organized and presented by Thomson Reuters. All right, let's get things kicked off by introducing everyone in the room. So Katie, I'll start with you.
I'm Katie Walter. I'm Marketing Director for the Law School business at Thomson Reuters.
I'm Chris Mammen. I'm a IP litigation partner at Hogan, Lovells, US LLP, and also teach from time to time at UC Hastings Law School.
I'm Diane Downs. I'm the Director of Attorney Recruiting at Morrison and Foerster Law Firm.
I'm Dave Maurer. I'm a Managing Director at Major Lindsay in Africa in San Francisco.
Wonderful. So to get things kicked off for our discussion here today, Katie, you kind of started this on the panel, but can you give us a bit of background as to why this is even an important issue for law students to think about?
Well, the market for hiring new attorneys, it comes down to what do law students want when they come out of law school and they want a job. And when you're thinking about what you are going to spend your time on in law school and how you're going to present yourself in hiring situations, you want to make sure that you're hitting on all the cylinders that a hiring manager is looking for you. And Thomson Reuters is incredibly interested in helping law schools meet those changing needs for our commercial customers as well as the law schools.
All right, so where the panel started off, which I thought was a great place to start, is really what are the qualities that a 21st century lawyer needs? So let's just go around the table. Chris, you want to start?
Sure. So I identified 4 characteristics that I think are important in the 21st century for a lawyer. And those are most importantly to be nimble, and at the same time to be cost efficient and tech savvy, and finally to be a trusted advisor. And so these are some characteristics that differ somewhat perhaps than what you might read about in a Scott Turow novel, 1L or something like that. Law firms and law practice today are really about keeping pace with clients, and clients have very high expectations for tech savvy, using technology well, being able to adapt and problem solve quickly, and to do so in a way that shows that you're able to be a trusted advisor that delivers well-reasoned, sound advice and counsel to them in the legal problems that they've brought to you.
Diane?
Sure. I think that law students have a lot on their plate just learning the law in their first year of law school, and that should be their primary focus because ability in law school is definitely one of the factors that we look at in terms of who we want to bring to the firm and who we want to hire. But looking forward to when you do arrive at the law firm or at your legal employer, I think you need to be business minded, both for the employer, that you understand how to record your time and how that impacts the whole project you're on and what resources to use, when to delegate, when to ask for help. All of those things are being business minded for the law firm, but also be business minded for our clients. So making sure that you understand your client's business, you understand the question that you're being asked in the larger context, and you understand the problem the client is trying to solve and what, how that fits into their overall business needs.
David?
Thank you. I think one of the key concepts that came up in our panel that towards the end was the idea of curiosity, being curious about the things around us and the way that we can learn and take in information. I think this is something not necessarily for lawyers just starting out. It is for that, but it's for practitioners in general to stay curious about where you might come up with solutions to your clients' problems. One of the things that was mentioned by Diane on the panel that I really like is, and I think, is lawyers are really just problem solvers. That's what we do, and you bring some of those things that Chris was talking about to solving those problems for clients. You being nimble, being curious, having business awareness, being cost efficient because you want to increase the value for your clients so that they continue to come back to your organization to get to get their problems solved. The other concept that I've talked about and that I think is important, because I look at the world as an increasingly complex place. There is no way that we will unwind the complexity that we're dealing with in our commercial setting and even in our society in general. So if I'm looking out on a career, I'd be focused on how do I get comfortable with complexity and how do I help businesses navigate that complexity so that I can provide value to them. And it's also a rapidly changing environment as well. So you layer those on top of each other, and young lawyers, young professionals to have some degree of comfort with uncertainty. It's not a skill as much as it is a characteristic to work on developing that.
I also think something that we talk about in our business that I think is really important is just mastering your craft in law school. I think one of the things you have to do while you're in law school is just be really good at what you're doing. Master your writing craft, master your legal research craft. I think, we're going to talk more about professionalism and other things kind of outside, the law school marketplace that you want to bring to your job. But I think sometimes students get so caught up in just getting good grades that they really forget that this is a vocational school that you're at, and you are trying to join a professional career, and you have to be good at what you do to be able to add value.
Well, I have two things that come to mind when you mention that. One is, I believe there's a view by legal employers, whether they're in-house or firms, as well as, I think this goes for clients and hiring firms, that you have a certain level of proficiency with your craft, whether it's research and writing. Now, younger lawyers, there's going to be some training and development that goes into that to help you hone it even more. But it's really table stakes to just get in the game. And the proxy for that, is really how are you stacking up against the people you were in law school with, or whatever the grading system is there, and that becomes the proxy for it. So there's an assumption that you have that. The idea of the other one I have is just a general one. When you're focused on grades, because that's how we're trying to differentiate ourselves with other people doing the same things, that becomes the objective as opposed to mastering the class. And I see this with my kids in school who are in junior high and the high school students that I know. It's about just the way that I think we have things structured. Get an A that shows that you know it. Not necessarily, right? Because you haven't focused on mastering, it's been chasing the grade.
Yeah, those table stakes are important for getting through a screening process. But to get hired and then beyond that, to be successful in the job itself, I think you have to be able to distinguish yourself with how you present yourself. And also, one of the best ways is through the enthusiasm that you show for the opportunity that's sitting in front of you, whether that be a job opportunity, whether that be a work assignment, whether that be a new question or a question you've answered many times before that you have to handle again. But looking at each of those things as an opportunity for growth. And this whole panel was poised as building the 21st century lawyer. And I think we should focus on the fact that that's an active word at the front of the title. Lawyers are this profession, or at least those that engage in the profession for the long haul, view themselves as always learning. And that's what excites them and attracts them.
And I think that's actually one of the skills you learn in law school is you learn to be a really good learner. Mm-hmm. When Allison and I started our business, one of the things that we talked about was, how in over our heads we were about running a business. Like neither of us knew how to be entrepreneurs. Luckily, we were really good at studying stuff, and we could read books and go to conferences and talk to people and learn new skills. And that's exactly what you have to do in your law firm. When they hand you a case, like when I was practicing law, I knew nothing about the area of the cases you were doing. And it's not like you get a lot of time to get comfortable with that material. Your job is to get it up to speed as fast as possible to be able to add value.
So I want to pick up on this this discussion of mastering your craft, and I want to maybe add a few comments about what that means in practical sense, as somebody who's been practicing law for 20 years, is particularly in the area of writing. Good legal writing is not brilliant, flowery literature. It is, relatively speaking, pedestrian, highly structured, highly logical writing that's very clear and concise. And so mastering the craft of legal writing is really an exercise in learning how to distill what you want to say to core principles and presenting it in a logical and persuasive way. And the test should be, when you read back through it, does this make sense? Am I missing something? Is there something not hanging together? And those are the kinds of questions that you should ask. Developing this habit of curiosity is also, a little bit of an abstraction, but it's really in tackling a problem and looking at a problem to engage critically and say, do I fully understand how this flows? Is there something that doesn't quite hang together for me? Can I figure that out, or have I maybe spotted a flaw in the argument that I'm reading? And can I develop that? And I think that's a core piece of the craft, both of legal writing and of legal thinking.
And I would add to that, if you don't mind. One of the things that I think is interesting is tying that into the legal research to legal writing piece, which a lot of those law students listening right now are in the midst of their legal research and writing classes. And I think one of the things about the craft that can get lost in those assignments is that where the nerdy part of me found legal research so interesting is you got to go find the things and then make them fit together to explain them to somebody else in that very logical way. And I think that is that's the piece that I think for me that's always been so powerful about having a mastery of the law is we are trained to be able to access sometimes very convoluted writing and make sense of it, package it in a way that either the court can easily digest it or regular people can easily digest it. People who might be sitting on a jury, people who are business people who are asking for our help. And I think that that's really powerful. And so to have that curiosity and that interest in what you are able to do because of these specialized skills that to me is one of the things that always made research and writing really kind of amazing. And that, making sure that skill is honed is important because no computer, we've mentioned AI in that panel, and I know that there's a lot going on around that, can do that part. I hope not, right?
Right.
No? Okay,
do the writing part?
Or do that synthesis part.
It may get there eventually.
No.
Yeah, I'll throw
Someday
it out.
Maybe.
It's not there.
It's not there yet.
now.
I know there are, the document review machines, which I get.
Document assembly.
Yeah.
Chris, I really like the way that you explained and talked about getting better, or the focus that you put on writing, the legal writing. after 20 years, do you still take that approach when you're looking through your briefs on how can I make this better? How can I improve as a writer?
I do. I'll give you one example of something that I did. This was about 5 or 10 years ago now, but it was a really, really valuable mid-career exercise in legal writing. As I was involved in a really big case. I mean, there was a lot of money at stake, and it was a really complicated technology that was issue in the case. And both sides ultimately appealed, wrote appellate briefs after the trial was over. And we had the luxury in that case of sitting down with these two appellate briefs, which were among two of the finest examples of persuasive legal writing that I had encountered. And a more senior partner and I sat down and we pulled those briefs apart and analyzed the structure and came to an understanding of what it was about the way they were put together that made them such terrific pieces of legal writing. So, and at the end of the day, the things that made them good legal writing were built on those fundamental structures, those fundamental logical structures that you learn in the first year of law school, and then just build on that.
As a practical matter, one of the things we tell our incoming associates every single year is, you're going to get a work assignment and it's going to be due at a certain moment, but you should have your own internal deadline for when you complete the first draft, and it should give you ample time to review and refine. And I think that's a common error of a junior associate, is to finish the project when it's due and then turn it in and then be quite distressed when they get the red line back.
Or to misunderstand the meaning of the word draft.
Yes.
Because draft to a boss does not mean like first draft.
Yeah.
Draft to your boss should be your final draft.
Correct.
That they are going to go redline, because they don't want to fix your typos and and see sloppy work.
Yeah.
One comment I want to make, and this is based on a couple things that have been said, is what I hear from the discussion that's happened so far that is key to success is that focus on continual learning and continual improvement. Getting better as we go along and finding ways that we can improve. And I think that helps at every stage of a career. The other, Lee, was something that you mentioned that we learned in law school. Learn how to learn. And really focus on, if I was back in law school now, knowing what I know, I would be really focused on how can I get even more efficient at learning, right? Be very mindful of what tactics work for me to do that. Because going back to the complexity in the world and how rapidly things change, that's what we have to do as lawyers for clients, is learn something new. Do it quickly. How can you do that? And be focused on continual improvement in all areas.
And looking for those opportunities to stretch and grow.
Yes.
So one of the things that came up at the end of the panel, which is something that I think is so important, especially among perfectionists, which many law students are self-labeled perfectionists, is this willingness to take on opportunities and take calculated risks to stretch yourself even if you might stumble. And what I thought the panel did a really great job of talking about was how important it was for the firm to give you those opportunities in a safe place where you can only stumble so far. But that you also have to be open to doing that next thing that you might not know how to do. If it's your first deposition, everybody's had a first deposition. You still have to stretch yourself. We talk about having grit. You need to be able to be uncomfortable and really take that on.
Yeah. So we touched on mentorship real briefly on the panel. And I didn't chime in because we'd moved on real quick. But the thought that I had is I really view mentorship as something that sits with the mentee more than the mentor. And to your point, what are you going to do to get better? Who are you going to ask? And you have to deliver something, I think, to the person that you're seeking to mentor you. And that may be, hey, I'll take that stretch assignment. Great, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do that. I know it's going to be hard, but I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to try to learn from other people to do that so that you really take control of what it is that you're trying to learn. And so, it's really, somebody said it's a two-way street on this integration. It's the same thing with mentoring, but I think the bulk of the responsibility resides with the mentee to access the mentorships there, because a busy partner is going to be very difficult to give you a structured mentor program.
Yeah, I think it's totally true.
I think I have a good example of that in both of the, well, on the law school side, taking advantage of your legal writing class to the fullest extent. So the same concept, if you have a due date, this is the ultimate time to take a not final draft and get input from your instructor, from a professor, from a 3L who's kind of a little heady. Take the time, because this is when it's okay to have red marks all over the page. No risk, because everyone, if you turn it in, you're going to pass the legal writing class. So that's a perfect no risk situation to grow. A young associate I heard speaking recently had a great suggestion, which is that they, whenever they turn in a final draft of an assignment to the partner, they create a new version of it and send it to the partner. Then the partner can engage with that document, and then they can compare it to the previous version of the document, so they can see exactly where the red line is, whether the partner used track changes or not. They can have a full accurate description. And then, and this is the part that probably takes this associate and puts them in the top 2% of highly motivated, they take a look at all the changes that were made and try to understand, do I know why the change was made? If that's the case, check, move on. But then they highlight the places where they don't understand why the change was made. And then they can go back for the feedback and mentoring and training that they need and be really respectful of that person's time and ask the specific questions and be really, really distinguish themselves among their classmates.
Yeah, what I'm thinking right now is that is a special associate.
That's
Somebody who really came up with the way that he or she is going to get better and is owning it.
Yeah. And then asking the partner to enter into a formal program with them of weekly meetings around kind of a mentor relationship, but it's saying I'm going to take advantage of the people who can teach me no matter how vulnerable I look or how much work I have to do to get that help.
Yeah, and one of the things we talk about a lot on this podcast, and our listeners probably think they can't say it one more time, but we talk about the importance of the growth mindset, and I think that example is so incredible, because instead of getting downtrodden or saying, I must not have great legal writing skills, this partner must think I'm stupid, they said, oh, this partner wants it done differently, I'm going to learn how to do that differently. I mean, I did PR for a little bit, and I remember right after graduating from college, and the first writing assignment I turned in, my boss just it was all red. There may have been the wasn't crossed out, but it was basically all red. And I was devastated. I thought I was so smart and I'd done so well in school. And I went to him very sheepishly and was kind of like, are you going to fire me? And he was like, no, that's just not the way I do it. You have to learn to write for me. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like, oh, you mean you don't think I'm just incompetent? And there's this idea that, especially when you're doing work for other people, you have to be open to tailoring your work to other people, but coming at it, from not the negative place of, oh my gosh, I must not be smart enough, or I can't believe I shouldn't have this job. They don't want to hire me or work on a project. It's got to be, I can be better. I'm working on my craft. This is a long-term project, and midway through my career, I'm still going to be working on my craft.
Right.
It's just feedback. Sorry.
Sorry. This kind of feedback is the kind of thing that somebody who's been doing it a long time is providing, and some of it may be purely stylistic, the preferences of that partner or professor, but some of it is for very sound reasons relating to sort of fundamentals of the craft. And I think that example of going back and trying to understand why each of the changes was made is just a very impressive, curious mindset. One other thing I wanted to mention about giving yourself plenty of time to complete a draft and complete a document is I told both my law students when I was teaching law school and when I'm working with associates in preparing motions and other kinds of legal writing is plan enough time so that when, if it's a 15-page assignment, when you have a fully written 15 pages that you think is complete and clean, you're halfway done. Mm-hmm. And then, maybe you need to let it sit and percolate for an hour or a day, and then you can go back and say, okay, how can I make this better? And what's wrong with this, or what holes did I leave? And it's always the case that you can spend an equal amount of time refining it from when you got your first 15 pages written to make it better. So,
well, Chris, when you were working in the law schools, did you find that students utilized all of their resources to practice what this associate did, which is to go to the law professors and learn what they could have done better and work on their craft? Did you see that? No, I know. Which I think is really a mistaken opportunity. I mean, I know law professors can be pretty intimidating, and some of them may not seem that nice in class, but they do choose to work with students for a living, and you are paying a lot of money for the privilege of having a relationship with them. You should go and talk to them, because having these tough conversations of why didn't you like my midterm, how could I change it? What do I need to be doing differently? That's actually where the magic happens. That's where the real learning happens, in my opinion. And
that's where their passion is too. They are passionate about helping you grow.
Right. Yeah. Or they hopefully, why else would you become a law professor? I hope, right?
A cushy job with a great salary and great benefits.
Okay, but we hope that they like students too.
That's, you mentioned mindset, and I think it has a lot to do with who in particular is drawn to law school, whether they go because they want to be a lawyer or because they haven't figured out what they want to do. You get those things back and you say, okay, great, I'm not smart enough because they're very fixed. I either could do this right from the beginning or I can't do it at all, versus being able to say, okay, it's just feedback. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how you trick yourself if you're in the fixed mindset category to get into the growth mindset, but I think that's what needs to happen.
One of the major ways is you just have to practice it and look for those moments where you do. We all have those moments. Like I don't care how evolved you are. You all have these moments when you get tough feedback and you're like, oh man, maybe I just shouldn't be doing X, Y, Z. But you can check yourself, and then the next comment can be, no, I don't want to think about it that way. I'm going to choose to do it differently. And I think that it is just like anything else, a practice.
Well, receiving feedback and reacting and responding to feedback, I think, is a really important business skill for lawyers and everyone else. And I think I can speak for myself, but I would imagine everyone at this table has had the experience of seeing that done well and not so much. So couple things that I would say. One, when you receive feedback, really resist the urge to defend what you did wrong. In the writing example, so many times I've been called in to coach an associate about their writing or get them a tutor, and they'll say, well, that's just stylistic for that particular partner. Well, yes, it might be, but the fact that you're not understanding the role of writing for that person whose name's going to be at the bottom of the brief is a problem, number one. The other thing is acknowledging the feedback is really important. I think sometimes we're so in our own shoes where we think, gosh, this intimidating person, whether it be professor, partner, whomever, is giving us this feedback, how difficult this is for me. Well, that might be very difficult for the other person too, to have a challenging conversation with you, to take the time to think, how do I want to say this so that I motivate the person to do something differently without crushing their soul with red marks, or maybe there's a little bit of soul crushing you want to insert. I don't know.
I'm going to maybe disagree a little bit with you there. Because as much as I hate to admit it, I think many lawyers are not very good managers, and so this is letting the law student audience in on a secret. But we're trained to think critically and to look for the flaw and identify the hole and hone in on that so that it can get fixed. And what that means when we provide feedback and mentorship is that we tend to spot the things that are wrong and fail quite often to notice the things that are right and good. And as somebody who's receiving feedback, it's important to perhaps remember that so that A, your soul doesn't get crushed by the all negative feedback, and B, that so you'll cut us as bad managers a little bit of a break.
Well, but I think the merger of those two thoughts is that you're worth getting feedback. Like as a junior person, someone has decided, whether in a very professional coaching kind of way or in a cruel, cold-hearted, vindictive kind of editing way, to spend, not to kick me out of the room, not to fire me, not to say go back to school, I don't want to see you, but to take the time to redline it, to take the time to make you better. And that is actually, like, that's a privilege. That feedback can be a privilege and a gift, but it can hurt too.
I'm so glad you brought that up in that way, because it reminds me of his last lecture. There was a statement in that book that, because it was written for his kids, I can't remember the name of the professor, but it's, when I stop pushing you, it means I don't care anymore. Mm-hmm. So you should be grateful that I'm pushing you. Yeah. And it's that exact sentiment. They're saying you can get better, and that's why I'm telling you that. But I will agree. I don't think lawyers are the best managers of people because of how direct we can be with things. So, like, that's wrong. Do it this way. Yeah.
Done. But managing up is an important skill for these junior folks, and I think if you start with the defense of what you did right, you're not going to be heard on the other end either. So acknowledging what you did wrong and saying, okay, well, this is an opportunity for me. I'm going to go think about what you said, and I'm going to come back. I do think it's effective when you come back to say, here are the things that I do in my process, being more transparent about how you avoid future mistakes or what you're working on. And that to me, that second conversation is the opportunity to show what you do well. I'm an administrator or cost center in a law firm, and I always have reported to partners. And I think that sometimes it is my job to explain to them that you really don't want me to take this 5-minute overview document and turn it into a project for your top client. You want me to get 12 of these done today. And so putting things in context is helpful, but understanding that they just, they can't even read the front page of the newspaper without seeing red lines. So it's a training and context issue.
Yeah. But I agree that second conversation is the one where you really are going to distinguish yourselves. You receive the feedback, and if you make an effort to analyze and understand it, and if you've been asked to make certain changes, the next draft should contain those changes. If there's some that you want to talk about, feel free to talk about them, but make the changes that you've been asked to make, and then move on from there.
I loved your comment about managing up, and I think for the law students listening, you don't have a lot of professional experience, and you haven't gotten the experience of managing up to someone who could be like a partner or a senior associate level at your law firm. I think your professors are a great place to start practicing this. We talk about going to office hours and not saying things like, I don't understand promissory estoppel, because your law professor is going to say, then go get a commercial outline and read about it. That's not a quality way to work with a law professor to try and get them to help you. Now, if you come with your outline and you have an attack plan for promissory estoppel, and you are struggling to apply that fact pattern or that attack plan to a fact pattern, and you're not sure exactly how the law functions, the law professor is likely to sit down with you and talk to you about it. And I think it's the same way. If you walk into a law, if you work into your supervisor and say, I don't understand why you didn't like my brief, that's probably not a good way to start that constructive conversation. It's just, you've got to do the work.
I'm thinking, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. It's the same thing. It's like, I'm having a difficult time here. I think I can go this way with it. Maybe I'm going to take it that way. What's your view on it? To have that sort, then you've limited what the scope is, right? You're going to get some feedback, and then you'll have that conversation, and it's a little more respectful of the time of the person that you're dealing with.
Or even better, I see these two ways of dealing with it. We could go this way or we could go that way. I'm inclined to think we should go this way, but there are these issues on the other side. What do you think?
Yeah.
Full analysis.
Provide a proposed solution, because if you get presented with a dilemma, most supervisors are going to say, okay, you've been thinking about this a lot longer than the 15 seconds since you've been in my office that I've been thinking about it. What do you think?
This goes back to something, or goes to something we were talking about on the panel on getting the experience and ability to exercise judgment in certain circumstances. This is a safe to fail way to do that, because you get to say to when you're going for that feedback, here's how I do it. No, that's a terrible idea. But now you know there's no damage. We need to go this way, and you've also shown to the person that you're working with or that you're providing work product to, that you have an analysis around it. They can tweak either the analysis or the actual decision process. I mean, that's kind of how I view it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit, because another thing that I thought was really interesting that came out of the panel talk today was the importance of, even for young lawyers, being equipped to handle some client management, from either the idea of interpersonal relationships with clients or being engaged in a client relationship enough that you could take on a stretch assignment, but also that sometimes clients might actually want to interact with more junior staff because it may be easier to have interpersonal relationships with that, or they may actually have more exposure to things like technology. So I'd love to, and maybe actually, Diane, we could talk to you about, from a law firm recruiting perspective, do you look for qualities that you think could, lead someone to have those, dare we say it, sales skills and client-facing skills?
Sure. I mean, at the entry level, it's very much apparent because we're in that on-campus zoo, 20-minute interviews, and so it really does require a high degree of communication skills, but we put them through lots of paces beyond that to meet with people. And our criteria have a lot to do with the performance skills, communication skills, executive presence. We do ask, we do look at writing samples. We sometimes have these hiring partner meetings where they're like, okay, gosh, it is very difficult to get a job here, and I'm the hiring partner. So it is and it isn't. I mean, I think it goes back to the enthusiasm and the engagement quality that if you can show interest in the job at hand and in enthusiasm for my firm in particular, I think that quality will translate over to when you are faced with a client problem. Are you going to be curious about it? Are you going to be engaged with the problem? Are you going to ask, kind of not be myopic about the legal issue, but rather how it impacts the business, the industry, that particular question? How does it fit into the big picture? So I think sometimes we get burned, sometimes we make mistakes, but for the most part, I think the interview format does help predict, how that person is going to behave. The other issue of judgment and what content comes out of the person's mouth, that takes a lot longer to develop. And I think that's another... This is we had a question about what are the great things about entry-level lawyers and what are some of the gaps. And I think one of the great things is the level of poise and confidence that we are seeing with entry-level lawyers. One of the gaps is sometimes not knowing how much they don't know at the front end. And so, there's so much information at their hands and so much dedication to, staying up all night and learning a whole new rule or all the case law, but not necessarily realizing, well, you don't have the practical judgment to know, how this works at a negotiation table or how often this even comes up.
It's great that you got an A in negotiations in law
right.
school, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're getting handed your first negotiation, second week.
Right.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to build that judgment.
And so how do you think, if I'm a law student and I am one of those straight out of undergrad, straight to law school, haven't really worked in a professional environment, where do I start to learn some of those skills so I don't walk into my law firm? Or I don't know if you guys have even hired folks too, but maybe Diane, you can start.
Clinics, internships, externships, and really be that sponge. I mean, come to the environment ready to learn.
Yeah.
Beyond that, some of those skills just come from working in some sort of a customer service job. when I was an undergraduate, I worked at a J.C. Penney's for a summer, and some of the professionalism, customer-facing, client-facing skills that carry over into law practice are the same kinds of things that it took selling blue jeans.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point, Chris. I worked a lot of restaurant jobs and bartending jobs through undergrad. Not so much in law school, but the stuff that I was doing in law school was still, very customer centered, and you learn a lot from doing that. As far as picking up on what the person's really saying, what's really at issue there, and I couldn't. I think that is a very important thing to do, and if you can get it. The other thing I was thinking of, and it occurred to me when we talk about business awareness, some of that business sort of minded stuff. If you don't have a job 1L, you can go take a business class if you haven't had a business class at a community college. If you're in California, I think there's $75 to $100 to go take a 4-unit class in business. I wouldn't take the accounting class. Maybe I'd take business process or business management or a marketing class. But if you really got downtime in the summer, that'd get you to some of those concepts.
I think a pricing class actually would be the kind of like you want to talk about how a business presents itself to the world. What price do they put on their product, and work backwards to find the strategy.
You can actually do all that online. I know there's pricing certifications that you can do some of the content online. So
I think I don't know why I've never thought of that, but that's such a great idea of an easy way to collect these additional skills, because one of the things that came up in the panel that we're not going to have time to dive into today in this podcast was, is it the responsibility of the law schools to teach a lot of these skills? Are they going to do it? That's a lot larger question. Are they the right people to do it? That's a separate question. But I think until those questions all get answered, you can still create those skills by reading books, by taking community college classes, doing online classes, going to workshops. I think that I bet that as a job applicant, if you talked about how you did that kind of stuff in a cover letter, that cover letter would actually get noticed. I don't know. I'm not a recruiting manager. Is that true?
I think that, how you package your experience is incredibly important. I have both retail and restaurant experience, and it's been over 20 years since either one of those has been at the forefront, but I definitely draw on those skills, and I have more than once thought, oh, this is a person who could benefit from being in the weeds on a lunch shift and really understand how to deal with stress, juggling, time management, project management. So don't undervalue your experience because it is not shiny in a way that your colleagues' experience might look. You need to make the leap and communicate the value of your experience to the hiring manager, whatever it is.
Well, I can't even believe it that we're almost out of time. So I just wanted to finish up with maybe 1 or 2 thoughts from everyone about your kind of best tips for law students. If you are a law student that's worried about how to set themselves apart and how to really be set up for success for their first job, what would be the advice you give? Katie, to put you on the spot, would you like to start?
I think that it does come down to not underestimating or not discounting all those sources of inspiration and motivation that you draw from. Those restaurant jobs, the high school club that you were in with the teacher that pushed you so hard. Taking all of that and applying it to your passion for the law will make you a better student. I will work as hard for this law professor as I worked for my drama coach, and then I will work as hard for my partner as I did for that law professor. Those are all those mentorships and those people who taught you all the way along. Even if it was out of that area, bring it and learn and grow from it.
A generation ago, I'm sure this is just a fictional anecdote, but the idea of
those are my favorite. Absolutely.
the law professor who says, look left and look right, one of you's not going to be here in 6 months.
I think that's Paper Chase.
Was that from Paper Chase?
Paper Chase.
Okay, there you go.
Because my contracts professor wrote Paper Chase. That's why I'm
Okay.
How many times did he tell you that? That he wrote
Paper Chase? I can't remember, but it definitely came up.
All right. So from the Paper Chase, I would offer up a new paradigm, which is look left, look right. This is the beginning of your network. Build a network starting now with the people you like, the people you enjoy being around. They are going to be your professional colleagues, whether you work directly with them or elsewhere in the community over the rest of your career. So start now.
Yeah, and just as a weird side note to that, I mean, just as an example of what happened today is I came to this event assuming that I would know no one. I've only talked to Katie on the phone, and then walk in and see someone who's manages a law firm who I was on a nonprofit board with. Hadn't seen her in a while. I turn around, a former professor of mine is sitting next to her, and you do realize that like this community, it's tiny. And so in one room, I have people that I have met in multiple different parts of my life, not just my professional life, and they're still going to remember who I was, in law school and, on its nonprofit board. And it's all building on each other. Your professional persona is, out there, and you should. I think that's incredible advice to just start thinking about that from day one.
So treat them well and develop the relationships.
Yeah.
So I would be remiss if I didn't give a plug to the career services people at your law school.
As a former career services, that's fine. Go for it.
I'm going to go for it.
Go for it.
One of the things that that both frustrated me and impressed me when I was in that role, we would try very hard with the first year class to help them do some self-reflection about what it is that does drive your passion and trying to define that. Now, in an interview setting, you may or may not reveal all of that. However, just even spending the time to know what is my preferred work style, what is my personality, what is my communication style, what do I want to do, so that the job that I'm chasing isn't just well, first of all, you're more poised to chase the right jobs.
Right.
And even if you have decided, in some period of time I want to do X, but first I'm going to do Y, you at least have a valid reason for going after Y, even if it's not your passion. So you then seem even more genuine for that first opportunity, even if it's a stepping stone. And that, that takes time away from the things that you probably wanted to be doing, which is, applying for jobs or getting ahead of the rest of the class to get that 1L or 1L summer opportunity. But in the long run, I would say being genuine about your passion takes some self-knowledge about what your passion is.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Couple things. One, with what Diane is talking about, I think there are a lot of resources available to law students, and I can look back at my time in law school that I may not have taken advantage of because I thought, hey, I can figure this out on my own. And career services may be one of those where if you're willing to ask for help and figure out where you can get the information to get better, there's a lot of people willing to, I think, help you on this journey. So I jotted down, don't try to go it alone if you don't have to. I think this is important in your career as well. When you get into those areas of uncertainty, try to figure it out, but you're going to reach a point where, hey, you got to get some input from somebody else. The other one, along the lines of what Chris had talked about, is, and based on some of the other stuff we were talking about earlier about staying curious and open to continual learning. There's very few people that I haven't learned something from in life that I've interacted with. Whether it's the guy that comes out and trims my tree, the waits, the person waiting on me or serving me in a restaurant that I can't, get something from. And I think if we take here's your network in law school, and we broaden that out a little bit, what am I going to be able to learn with all the people I come in contact with, and how can I use that to get better in what I provide to those around me and those that I'm providing a service to? I think that mindset can be helpful. And then the other one, I'll go with what I said on the panel: learn to sell. I think law is a business. It's it's a vocation that you learn to do certain things, and you have to be able to sell those services. What I mean by sell, it's not used car salesman. It's trying to uncover your client's needs, what their objectives are, and trying to match yourself and the services that you can provide as a solution and the appropriate solution for what they're trying to solve.
I think that's all great. Again, we would like to thank Thomson Reuters for sponsoring this episode. Please visit them at lawschool.westlaw.com. And with that, we're unfortunately out of time. Our episodes are typically released on Mondays. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.